Hey, I'm Liz. Here's everything you'll find out about the Hyke and Byke Zion 2-person tent in this rain test video, and let's get right into it. So this was my heavy rain test. It rained pretty heavily for slightly less than an hour, and after that it rained lightly for about 3 hours or so. I think it was enough to put every single part of this Zion through a decent amount of rain. Now, here's a few things that I noticed in this rain test. This 2-person Zion doesn't have a super high peak height, so I found that it could take wind decently well, especially since I staked down and guyed out the entire tent. Also, it has a nice dome shape, so I didn't find any pooling at the top of the tent, and all the rain just dripped to the ground nicely. It also rained heavily enough that there was a little bit of flooding in my yard, and here are some shots of what the light flooding looked like. Now let's go check out how this tent did, and I'm gonna split the rain test results into 4 different parts. Okay, after unzipping the vestibule and the door, the first thing that I see inside this tent is that there's water right smack in the middle of the tent. I honestly found this super weird, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me how this leak got into the tent. I did check the top of the tent and found that the seams at the top were slightly damp, so that might be where the leaking came from. If you've had the same experience with this type of leaking, let me know where it's coming from, I'd love to know. Result number 2, did the light flooding cause any leaking into the tent? The answer is, surprisingly no, even though the right side of the tent was sitting in a little bit of water. I checked the flooring and the corners and there was no leaking from the flooding at all. Also, I think this is the perfect segue to the seam taping of this tent. So here are the Rainfly seams and they're all taped. And now for the inside of the tent, I found that the only seams that were taped are the floor seams. There's a seam running down the length of the tent, plus all 4 corner seams, and I feel like these have been pretty thoroughly taped, so that's why no water got into the tent from the light flooding in my yard, thanks to the seam taping. The rest of the seams in the tent were not taped, and these include the bathtub flooring to tent body seams, and these door seams on the other side. There are also these seams running from the bottom to the top of the tent, also not taped, but these have been inverted though, although I've never really found these to be enough protection from the rain, and well, they were slightly damp at the top after the rain test. Now, for result number 3. Apart from the flooring, which I checked earlier in this video, I also checked the Rainfly and found that it was dry from the inside. I also checked the mesh of this tent and most of it was dry. However, the mesh at certain areas of this tent was slightly damp, and that brings us to result number 4. And this is also my biggest issue with this tent. I found quite a few smaller droplets of water throughout the entire width of this tent, both the left and right width, and there was even some dirt that got into the tent as well. On top of that, I found that this info paper thing at the right side of the tent was completely damp and letting water into the tent. Why? Because the seam at the top wasn't taped or sealed like what I explained before. So it got completely drenched in the heavy rain, water slowly seeped in, soaked the entire thing, and eventually dripped into the tent. Apart from the lack of seam taping, there's another reason for this leaking, which is the backsplashing, and for that, I gotta talk a little bit about the tub floors. Here are my measurements. The tub floor at the length of the tent is about 6 inches high, and the tub floor at the width of this tent is about 5 inches high. Honestly, to me at least, this is really quite low. Some of my other budget-friendly tents have tub floors up to 10 inches high, and that was just high enough to prevent any backsplashing. 5 to 6 inches for this tent, definitely not high enough. Also, one more thing, I found it super weird that the tub floor at the length was taller than the tub floor at the width. Usually, the width would have a much higher bathtub flooring because the Rainfly can't be pulled away from the tent body as much, so there's less rain protection there. On the other hand, the length of the tent usually has a vestibule, so the Rainfly is pulled further away and there's more rain protection there. And here's one more point related to the tub floors, and we're gonna talk about the Rainfly Gap next. See, at the width of this tent, I actually used a guy line to pull the rainfly away from the tent body, and I staked that down. However, the rainfly doesn't extend down enough, so there's a gap that water can backsplash into the tent. Here's what the left width of the tent looks like, and here's what the right width of the tent looks like. I mean, the gaps are so big, I can pretty much look out from inside the tent. That's even more reason to have a higher tub floor at the width. On the other hand, the gaps at the lengths of this tent are much smaller, so it doesn't need to be as high a tub floor, and I didn't have the same issue with backsplashing here. Speaking of backsplashing, if you look at this shot carefully, you can see the water basically bouncing on the ground. That's how backsplashing happens. If it rains heavy enough, the water bounces off the ground and back into the tent. Also, after I took the rainfly off to check the tent underneath, I could see the dried up water and dirt on the bathtub flooring, which again shows that the tub floor isn't high enough, and that's how the backsplashing got into the tent. Now, here's one good thing about this tent. I actually left the 2 rainfly vents at the 2 sides of the tent open throughout the entire rain test, and I found that these vents didn't leak at all. I really liked that the vents are facing almost vertically downwards, which really helps prevent rain from getting in. So that's at least one pro about this tent. Overall, and maybe this is just my unlucky experience in the heavy rain, but I wouldn't really recommend this tent if you're expecting heavy rains. Here's a quick summary of the rain test pros that I found for this tent. Here's a quick summary of the rain test cons for this tent. And well, as you can tell, there are quite a few more cons than pros. The thing is, even if you seal the tent and do waterproofing prep work, it's still gonna leak from all the backsplashing, and this is the first time that I got so much dirt into the tent. And the low tub floor isn't something that I've been able to fix at all. But to find out how this 2-person Hyke and Byke Zion does in other tests, and whether it's still value for money, check out this video on the screen here. Thank you for watching this rain test, you're awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.